I did move to Venezuela with the intention of understanding, researching how architecture had um, something to give, or a perspective that would be of use to, and I guess answer a bit of this inquiry that remained present in me as an enigma that I mentioned earlier had surfaced while I was in Rome, seeing these artists and their passion for the work that they were doing. It's also the result of encounters at the GSD, where I didn't feel that what I was listening or seeing really was so relevant to folks, or to the let's say the understanding or the narrative that was being presented about informal settlements or barrios. So the second day that I arrived in Caracas, and I'm not exaggerating, I went to the barrio La Moran with my uncle, and he took me there one summer 2 or 3 years prior to that moment, and it was an eye-opening experience for me to actually walk within the barrio and talk to folks and see how this part of the city coexists. And yet, being part of the city was the first time that I had visited a barrio. So when I came back, or when I came, let's say, for the first time in 2007, that was a lot of the focus of my time. So I established a relationship with a local NGO that was working with this community, or had been for a number of years, La Moran, and just observed and listened and observed some more. I think I was overwhelmed, so very far from feeling that I would have anything to say or propose. Gradually warming up, I decided that I'd present to the University, La Universidad Central de Venezuela, the idea of a studio that would go to the Barrio La Moran, and that would be the focus of our work, which was an amazing experience with students in their 3 final years, kind of organized as a vertical studio. And I had some of the brightest students at the school signed up for this studio. It had been the second that I conducted there. And we produced collectively, I think, something that was quite valuable, and I was enthusiastic about it enough to turn it into an exhibition. And I had the support of a local development. It's in Caracas, but it's a development bank for all of Latin America called GAF. And we had it presented at the School of Architecture, but at the School of Architecture, I'm translating literally, it would be like the equivalent of the AIA in Venezuela. And then in a museum much closer to the community, so that they could come and participate and see the findings. That was the beginning of this line of inquiry and this line of research. We also tried to put together a project in La Moran that had to do with waste collection and water, the mitigation of water that is mostly a creek combined with sewage water. And that didn't progress for many reasons, but it had the backing of the development bank, and it had ostensibly another important NGO on board. But then it kind of didn't progress the way I imagined it would. And that was key, because I learned some very important things. One is, in the mentality of most everybody in the country then, the government was still the head force at the national level, at the local level. And so anything of any scale was always understood as funded by the government, propelled by the government. And that is the effect that an oil wealthy country has on the minds of civil society, is to actually diminish their sense of agency, or conveniently kind of, hand that over to, government, who does everything. And I think also just, being young, being a woman, might have had something to do with that as well. But I fortunately won something called the Wheelwright Prize from Harvard. And that allowed me to see experiences that had already been built in many parts of Latin America. So Rio, Guayaquil, Valparaiso in Chile, Medellin, Lima, and then I added later Buenos Aires, Mexico City, and of course Caracas. They gave me a repertoire of practices and of projects that had different ways they had build consensus. So their social approach was different, and that was sort of an interesting way of having kind of like a menu of approaches. Financially too, they had come about in ways that ranged from the local government and the national government, but also private investors, NGOs, just effort put together by the community. And they existed. They were proof that this was possible. And so in the face of all these folks that had previously kind of said to me, well, that isn't possible. These ideas that you have are not possible unless you have something very robust like the government behind you. There's a way for me to kind of have a better answer next time. Well, no, this has been done, and this has been done, and this has been done with different approaches. I also had closely thereafter the opportunity to map the growth of the barrios in Caracas with the support of a private investor. And so for 2.5 years, we actually produced cartography that was not available going back in time all the way to the 60s, of presence of barrios in the 60s, and cartography that we were able to get our hands on, proving that this isn't a recent phenomena. This is something that actually you can trace even back to the historical maps of the city in the 20s and the 30s. And it became a publication that we called Cartography of the Caracas Barrios, showing how they grew over 50 years, and that at least half of the population in Caracas lives in a neighborhood that began as an informal, self-built neighborhood. And so this publication makes a case of recognition, of acknowledgement. This is half of the city, even if the territory is only a quarter of the urban footprint, it is half of the population. And so the stigmas and the notions that this is like, something small and marginal and aberrant, I think, start to really have to be questioned. That opened doors for us to be invited to be a part of an initiative funded by Citibank of public space making. I mean, it was going to be an urban intervention, but given the research that I had done, I felt that public spaces were absolutely crucial in building opportunities to kind of integrate people and territories. So we built over a dozen during a 3-year period under this modality with the invitation of another NGO. And then after that, with the frustrations that brought, because there were many, and I think with changes that were happening in Venezuela too, becoming, I mean, 2017 was a very, very difficult year of street manifestations. Things really turned in a critical way. Lots of transnational companies decided finally to leave the country. And so that is precisely, I was encouraged to start my own non-for-profit. And that's when Enlace Asociación Civil started. And our first proposal was to the American Embassy for a project. It took a while to kind of get this together and approved by them and get them on board. But that is the beginning of the story of La Palomera. And I think we had some wait for them to take this risk with us on a project that would be entirely within an informal settlement based on art and culture. And we named that project Integration Process Caracas, and it was a joint project of ourselves, Enlace Arquitectura, Enlace Foundation at that point, and Ciudad Laboratorio. And we have collaborated ever since then as these kind of two entities, art and architecture on one side and journalism and advocacy on their part. The program had artists who engaged with the community on different levels. The physical one, dance, but also registering their gardens, kind of a map of gardens. We rescued some of their celebrations like the Cross of May, and took that as an opportunity to also create what we call the mobile museum with all these experiences that the artists had been producing to share them with the community, a larger community presence. But what was fascinating is that these events also had presence from outside of the barrio. So non-barrio people from the city came and participated. So the way to integrate started being apparent that it's not a physical public space that integrates the territory. It's really people crossing these supposed boundaries and practicing being, in different types of urban fabrics within the city. We celebrated also the history with founders of the neighborhood or their descendants speaking about how the neighborhood came about, which is not recorded in the official stories about the history of Caracas for sure, or of its architecture. And that we synthesized into an exhibition that we called the Complete City La Palomera Acknowledgement and Celebration in the Hacienda La Trinidad in Caracas, which has become a very important ally of all our efforts in the project. And throughout, we also had the support of another very key organization called Fundación Bigot, who has for decades been supporting and articulating traditional art forms, music, dance, weavings within the country. And that is the base of what we then were able to show at the Biennial of Architecture in Venice in 2021, and also at the Chicago Architecture Biennial, which ended in December of last year. We continue to move forward in a concrete way as well. So it wasn't just an art and cultural program, but with these conversations about the city and about, difference, we were able to get the local service company that handles waste on board and the municipality change the way waste is collected in La Palomera so that containers at the entrance, which is kind of the ubiquitous way of handling waste, could be eliminated. And so this is something that is astounding, but every barrio is greeted at the entrance with a huge container of overflowing waste, which is just a poor quality service being rendered to a part of the city that actually has, a note in their payments monthly of waste collection. And yet the service is so disparate. So waste is collected door to door. It's coordinated with the garbage truck, which comes, and the waste is then introduced directly into the garbage truck, and you don't have an intermediate point. This will eventually, and sooner than later, translate into a separate recycle and non-recyclable landfill waste operation. And it's been so loved by the community and others who come to visit that we've had replicas in other barrio neighborhoods, and a larger one in Santa Cruz, which is 10 times the size of La Palomera. We converted a heap of waste that was always at the entrance into a lovely plaza and a completely different way of handling the waste. We also have a center that was an abandoned space. It was going to be a school owned by the municipality that over the past year and a half, we've been slowly transforming into a cultural and art center, but more than that, it'll serve also as a kind of an agent from the barrio to talk about the city at large, the notion of the complete city, which includes the barrios. And already has a program of percussion, music lessons, after school homework opportunities for children, the Diablos Danzantes, which is a group that celebrates kind of a form of folklore with masks of devils. They practice here and they practice for other religious festivities as well. Gardening, we're putting together a kitchen for culinary school with a fantastic woman who's won social entrepreneurial prizes called Maria Fernanda Di Giacove. And so allies keep on adding. We've had several embassies come on board, like the French embassy who supported us in the water collection equipment. So the water of the center is all rainwater or a good portion of the year. The Swiss embassy came on board as well. We have had allies from Germany. It's the Cross Design. The Graham Foundation is supporting us in a cultural program. The Goethe Foundation as well, or the Goethe Institute, I'm sorry. So we hope that it will really become somehow this way of understanding interactions in the city that will become contagious and can inform practices of participation and a democratic way of conceiving the city beyond its limits. And many things in the years to come that we're starting to cook up right now.